Hello everybody, I'm Dan Murrell here with a different video than I was expecting to bring you today, but some potentially massive news broke last night that I felt like I had to talk about here on the channel. Now, as you
Love
know,
you, the Gemini.
we
Thank you
don't
for the
cover
prime.
politics specifically here very often, but this was an announcement from President Donald Trump that happened last night that could have potentially massive ramifications on the entertainment industry. So let's jump right into it. Last night, as has become standard, the president posted on his social media platform, Truth Social, quote, "The movie industry in America is dying a very fast death. Other countries are offering all sorts of incentives to draw our filmmakers and studios away from the United States. Hollywood and many other areas within the USA are being devastated. This is a concerted effort by other nations and therefore a national security threat. It is, in addition to everything else, messaging and propaganda."
Also, the thing is, too, is that a lot of people will react to Hassan's clips and videos, etc. That's getting into politics. If you are reacting to Hassan, who does politics all day, every day, and whether you're agreeing with him or you're disagreeing with him, like, you're diving into political commentary just by doing that. Did you see this article matching up the timeline of Trump's bring back Hollywood and reopen Alcatraz comments with Escape from Alcatraz airing on South Florida cable TV? I am telling you, Donald Trump is somebody who reacts to his immediate surroundings. He will watch something, then that will be where his next policy decision comes from. The 1979 film starring Clint Eastwood about the daring 1962 escape attempt aired on the local PBS channel just 6 hours before the president made his demand that the prison be reopened. Shut the fuck up. I think when you understand how actually simple-minded Donald Trump is, this man is glued to his TV, okay? The first Donald Trump presidency, we know that rather than like reading his briefings, reading the things that his staff would give him, he was glued to Fox and Friends all day. He was watching cable news all day long. And that was affecting his brain and like all the things that he would write on his social platforms and then what he would announce publicly. Like he responds to whatever it is that, like, the last thing that someone told him or what he's watched on TV. The president's sudden push for the tourist destination of Alcatraz to once again become a maximum security prison complex. Donald Trump is bringing back Alcatraz. Came just hours after South Florida PBS station aired the 1979 classic film Escape from Alcatraz. The president spent the past weekend at his Mar-a-Lago resort, which is located in Palm Beach. Rebuild and open Alcatraz, Trump blared on Truth Social just before 6 p.m. local time on Sunday. So if you see something like that and you're like, where the fuck is this coming from? Where is Donald Trump wanting to reopen Alcatraz? Like, this feels so random. Where is this coming from? Just, you know what? Assume that he's watching something on his TV, which in this case is probably Escape from Alcatraz, and going, you know what? I'm going to bring it back. For too long, America has been plagued by vicious, violent, and repeat criminal offenders, the dregs of society who will never contribute anything other than misery and suffering. When we were a more serious nation in times past, we did not hesitate to lock up the most dangerous criminals and keep them far away from anyone they could harm. According to local television listings, WLRN 26, Miami's local PBS affiliate, broadcasted Escape from Alcatraz on Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. The movie, which stars Clint Eastwood, was re-aired the following morning at 11 a.m. It's so funny to hear him talk about how he wants to return to serious times, that we used to be a serious nation, when he is the most unserious person. MAGA, Donald Trump, it is so unserious. The dregs of society, that's you, buddy. That's you. That's you and your ilk. The biographical drama recounts the 1962 escape attempt from the island fortress, which is located in San Francisco Bay. While the prison was touted as being escape-proof throughout its infamous history, the film suggests that Frank Morris, played by Eastwood, and 2 other fugitives may have been successful in their mission. While it is still a mystery whether the daring escape attempt was successful, Alcatraz closed less than a year later in 1963. One of the main reasons for its closure, as critics pointed out after Trump floated the idea of once again making it a prison, was that it costs roughly 3 times more to run it as a standard facility. Due to its location on a small island, all supplies, including fresh water, need to be brought in by boat. Yeah, not ideal. Additionally, experts have noted that it would cost millions of dollars and take years to rebuild the facility and make it a modern, functional prison. It's a museum. If you've never been to Alcatraz, it's literally a museum. Like, it's something that you can see on a tour. The president was asked during an Oval Office press conference on Monday why he decided that he needed to resurrect Alcatraz after it had been shuttered for decades, prompting Trump to deliver a rambling response that included him touting his own cinematic vision. My God, he wants to be an artist. He wants to produce shows on Broadway. He wants to control the Kennedy Center. He thinks he's this great visionary. That's who he thinks he is. He thinks that he is some profound visionary. Well, I guess I was supposed to be a movie maker. Oh my God. That's what this always comes down to. I mean, it represents something very strong, very powerful in terms of law and order. A country needs law and order. Alcatraz is, I would say, the ultimate, right? Alcatraz, Sing Sing, keep it out of your mouth. Keep Sing Sing out your damn mouth. But it's right now a museum, believe it or not. A lot of people go there. Yeah, a lot of people go there, and now you're talking about putting people in there. You fucking ding dong. In the end, Trump described Alcatraz as representing something that's both horrible and beautiful and strong and miserable and weak. Those are all the adjectives that he knows. The president has a tendency to react to what he sees on television. Yes, we know. Most prominently by his virulent cable news viewing habits. A countless number of Truth Social posts and tweets, including some he made on Sunday, have been in direct response to segments he had just seen on Fox News or other networks. Yeah, he has a baby brain. He just responds to whatever it is that he's watching, or whoever, the last person that's whispered into his ear. Which is why when Laura Loomer was hanging around him and whispering into his ear, we could see the effect of that. It would stand out, of course, if the president had indeed tuned into PBS on Saturday night or Sunday morning, especially considering his recent executive order calling for the government to pull back all funding of public broadcasting. Oh my fucking God.
Therefore, I am authorizing the Department of Commerce and the United States Trade Representative to immediately begin the process of instituting a 100% tariff on any and all movies coming into our country that are produced in foreign lands. We want movies made in America again. Later last night, he told C-SPAN, quote, "What they've done is other nations have been stealing the movie-making capabilities from the United States. If they're not willing to make a movie inside the United States, then we should have a tariff on movies that come in. And not only that, governments are actually giving big money. They're supporting them financially. That's sort of a threat to our country in a sense." Now, the money part, I understand. The government propaganda stuff, I'm not really as sure about, unless the president is specifically referring to movies that are imported directly from other countries, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But
No,
really,
he's
the
not
financial
talking about
stuff
that.
has been flagged by people across the political spectrum for a while now. The idea that more and more major productions...
So, it's basically think about Lord of the Rings, right? Lord of the Rings famously filmed New Zealand. Donald Trump's idea, his great vision, is that you would make Lord of the Rings in, I don't know, fucking Ohio.
Are leaving the U.S. in order to get made in other countries because it is cheaper, honestly, for them to do that. Now, normally when a proposal like this is made, it comes with a bit more detail so people can really understand what's going on. But in this era when policy changes are largely announced on social media, this is kind of becoming the new norm. And Hollywood has already taken notice of the president's words. Variety reported last night, quote, studio executives convened emergency calls after Trump issued his declaration, though there's enormous uncertainty about whether the president has the authority to institute these tariffs, as well as how they would work practically.
Yeah, you know the Studio Ghibli ChatGPT AI images that all these hogs are obsessed with? Like literally the White House cannot stop posting AI generated Studio Ghibli images to like gloat about their evil deportation policies. Studio Ghibli it's foreign, okay? This is Miyazaki. These are Japanese films. So you're gonna impose, of course they have no appreciation of like actual Studio Ghibli, but that will limit, that's an example of access that could be limited to films like that, right? Anime. I know some of these hogs love their anime. I mean, we already saw what happened when the Switch or whatever it was got delayed.
It was also unclear what the impact would be on the many films that shoot overseas.
Fratello, thank you for the 11
that include
months.
Sequels to major franchises such as Avatar, The Avengers, and Mission Impossible. Studios were hoping to get more information about whether certain films that had already been completed or were already in production would be exempt. There was also confusion about why the president has singled out movies while not mentioning television production. In a statement to Deadline, a representative from California Governor Gavin Newsom's office said, quote, we believe President Trump has no authority to impose tariffs under the International Economic Emergency Powers Act, since tariffs are not listed as a remedy under that law.
But like, it doesn't matter to sit by and go, well, he can't do that. He's doing the shit that he just wants to do, okay? So this idea, like, if you're getting bogged down by, can he do that? He can't do that. You can't do that invoking the Emergency Powers Act.
In addition, Deadline spoke to what they described as a representative from a leading U.S. film company who is preparing to shop for films at the Cannes Film Festival, saying, quote, Trump's moves are already affecting sales in China, but this would reduce the entire global market, with buyers not wanting to pay minimum guarantees if there will be a tax on films in the Cannes market or on films they've already acquired. It affects domestic distribution deals, but it also impacts
so let me explain film festivals, okay? So what happens at these major film festivals is not just films being shown, and you know, for festivals like Cannes, for a lot of the films it's their debut, it's their premiere, it's sales. So I used to work in international film production for Sony, specifically in sales. So my boss was in charge of sales, of acquiring films at festivals. So she would go to all the festivals, and then also selling our Sony films to buyers. That will be affected by these tariffs. It is going to affect the selling and the buying of films at these major festivals, which is why these festivals really exist.
Equity players who have money in movies, because their films will suddenly be worth less money. We won't be able to make movies for the same budgets, actors won't get paid the same fees, and the list goes on. Simply, it would destroy the independent sector. So let's talk about the films that are going to be impacted here, or that seem likely.
Would all Sony films be considered foreign? No.
To be impacted. And let's start with the ones that are easiest to talk about, which are international films. Those are movies that are made outside of the United States, but which are picked up for distribution by studios.
Sorry, let me elaborate on that. So Sony is obviously owned by the Japanese conglomerate Sony Corporation, but Sony Pictures is an American film studio. So it's one of the major studios in Hollywood. So not all Sony films are foreign.
or production companies inside the United States. These are movies from other countries like Parasite
Sony
or the Demon Slayer series or I'm Still Here, which won the Academy Award earlier this year. Now, the way that this works is that these movies are made by talent overseas or in different countries, and then a studio in Hollywood will come in and pay a distribution fee that will allow them to show the movies in theaters here in the United States. With a 100% tariff in place, it's almost certain that Hollywood studios or other companies would be less likely to buy a film that they know would be subject to these proposed 100% tariffs, or at the very least, that they would pay less for these films up front, knowing that they were going to incur greater costs, which would really disincentivize a lot of these sales to American distributors. It's also possible that some countries would choose to retaliate, as we've seen China threaten to do, and threaten tariffs on imported American films in their countries, which could lead to lesser distribution for U.S. films internationally, which would lead to lower box office for companies here in the United States. And really, when we're talking about international films specifically, I don't really see a win here on either side. I think that this would just...
Okay, and remember, I said this yesterday, that Donald Trump doesn't understand fucking anything. He doesn't understand trade. He doesn't understand tariffs. He doesn't understand surplus versus deficit. So even though overall the U.S. has a trade deficit in goods, which is what has like for decades caused Trump to be like, wait, God, tariff, beautiful word. When it comes to digital services, when it comes to, film exports, which we're talking about here, the U.S. has a surplus. So America exports more films than it imports because we have the largest film industry. Why do you think the Oscars are the most prestigious awards show in the world? That for Bong Joon-ho and Parasite, it was such a big deal to have the first foreign language film win Best Picture. And it's something that like foreign films have for a long time been kept from the Oscars, and that's changed more in recent years. But the Oscars are such a significant award show because of the American film industry being number one, being the biggest, being like when you think of the film industry, you think of Hollywood.
As that executive said in the quote to Deadline, a big blow to the international film market here in the U.S. And as a movie fan, I would hate to see fewer international films get distribution here in the United States because they'd be harder to find. And I think that this would...
Trump just wants every movie to be Birth of a Nation. He just wants every movie to be Birth of a Nation or like Sunset Boulevard or Gone with the Wind.
Also adversely impact smaller movie theaters, the ones that show independent films and international movies. And really, if we're talking about any sort of competition that international films pose to Hollywood films here domestically, I think that it's kind of a moot point. The highest grossing international film last year domestically in the US was Kalki 2898 AD from India, which brought in $18.2 million. Naja 2, which is China's highest grossing film of all time, only brought in $17 million domestically. And even the most successful international films like Parasite and Godzilla Minus One have topped out between $50 and $60 million domestically, except for Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon back in the year 2000, which made over $125 million. The MPA reported that in 2023, Hollywood exported 3 times as many films as it imported, which generated a trade surplus of $15 billion. So I don't think this is an economic issue, really, with international films versus domestic films. Now, international films that are on a streaming platform here in the United States are a completely different matter. Netflix licenses a lot of films that are produced internationally. It's a key part of their structure, especially when we talk about movies from South Korea, increasingly movies from India.
Netflix
Netflix
has a lot of production in Korea.
Subject to a tariff. there's really no way of telling how that would even work. What would you base the tariff on? Would it be views here in the United States versus around the world? Would it be a percentage of the budget versus those views? We really don't have any answers to that question right now. But this is something that seems like it could affect not only theatrical distribution, but also the streaming model here in the US. And if there is a loophole for streaming films, if they're not affected by these tariffs, then we could see more Hollywood productions that are made internationally that just then go straight to streaming instead, which really wouldn't address the underlying problem here. This seems to be targeted mostly to Hollywood movies that in recent years have moved their production increasingly to countries outside of the United States. And I want to be very clear about something. This is a very real problem that is affecting domestic film production in the U.S.
But of course, his plan, his statement that he put out on Truth Social, and then what he elaborated on, not really for the media, it doesn't talk about domestic incentives. So the issue is that the cost of shooting in the U.S. and specifically in California is more expensive. And so the costs need to come down. There need to be, more incentives for these productions. And so like doing what Trump is planning to do, hopefully not, with the tariffs is not going to address the problem of the rising costs of shooting in the United States, specifically in California. So this has been an ongoing issue with production moving outside of Los Angeles, leading to fewer opportunities, especially Los Angeles being such an expensive city to live in. It's had a really detrimental effect on a lot of people's lives and careers here. So there is a problem, but of course this is not the solution.
Affecting
Sean, thank
people
you for
that
the
have
19
worked in the
minutes.
entertainment industry for decades.
You
that
did
see
miss
fewer
fashion.
and fewer jobs available in the U.S. When you look at the film industry in Los Angeles, the jobs started going away first to other states like Louisiana and Georgia that offered better tax incentives for studios to go make their movies there. And really post-COVID, a lot of that has gone to other countries like the UK, Ireland, Australia, countries that are offering even better incentives, sometimes up to 25 to 40% in order to lure those productions there. Ireland, for example, offers a 32% tax credit for film, television, and animation projects up to 125 million euros, which means that if a studio makes a $140 million movie entirely in Ireland,
How
they
bad
could
will this
receive
get for writers? I mean, it's bad for
$44.8 million
everyone.
back. California, by contrast, offers a 20% tax credit for a feature up to $100 million of spending and only funds $330 million of total tax credits per year, with just $115 million of that allocated to feature films, which means that same $140 million film made in California would receive at most $20 million back from the state, as opposed to the $44.8 million from Ireland. These competing tax credits aren't new, but the increasing international credits combined with the decreasing domestic credits have made a crisis that was bad much, much worse. And it's a problem.
But even that, with that being said, remember that the entertainment industry still has a positive trade balance. They have a surplus with every film market in the world. So they make a lot of money exporting their films all around the world. So it's just stupid too. God, I mean, it's all stupid. It's all
that needs a solution. The question that we have to ask now is this tariff plan the solution that's needed? The first question that has to be answered is, how exactly is this system going to work? What will be subject to tariffs? If a movie studio here in the United States spends $150 million to make a movie in a different country, is the 100% tariff applied to that $150 million worth of production costs that was spent in the other country? Will the tariff be applied to ticket sales here domestically for a movie that's made in a different country? Will it be applied to the gross or net revenue that a movie made in another country is able to bring in? Or will these tariffs only be applied to films that actually get tax rebates from other countries in order to produce films there? Depending on how these tariffs are applied, the studio response is going to be vastly different. And understanding what the tariff system is the first step for Hollywood to figure out how to react. For example, if the overseas production costs are what are subject to being tariffed, then if a studio spends $150 million overseas to make a movie, it could then be tariffed 100%, which would be another $150 million in order to get the film shown again here in the United States. And if costs go up dramatically...
Cutie over there bagging deco orders and stressing about tariffs, and this shit's happening now too when the economy gets this fucked. Everything being inherently political becomes so much more clear to people. Yes, people understand politics when it's directly affecting them. That's when that's when like they pay attention. That's when they understand it, when they're seeing the direct effect that it's having.
Dramatically, then that is going to
having to pull extra shifts.
Trickle down to the people that are buying tickets, or at the very least.
Like when she called me and said, explain these tariffs like I'm 5, the way I explained it to her was check your supplies. Check your suppliers. See if the prices have already gone up. See if it's even available, the stuff that you've been buying. And she did, and that was how she understood it. I was like, I can try and break this down to you, which I did, but I said, you're going to understand this by looking at the impact that this is having on your business. You're a small business owner. You buy supplies from places overseas, or the American companies that you buy from, they get their supplies from China and other countries. And so you will see the effect in the supply chain.
To the theater owners, we could see studios going to theaters and saying, hey, listen, our production costs have risen dramatically, and so we now need a bigger percentage of the movie ticket sales than we've been getting. The other question is, what exactly counts as a movie that is produced outside of the United States? For example, if Marvel Studios shoots a movie in Atlanta, Georgia, as they did with Thunderbolts, but has the visual effects done in whole or in part overseas, as almost every movie does now, do they have to pay a partial tariff? And if so, how much? What about a James Bond movie, a franchise that is now wholly owned by an American company,
a lot of
Amazon
questions
and GM?
Here.
Bond films take place almost entirely in countries other than the US, so does shooting on location still count as being produced in a foreign land? If Warner Brothers were to revive the Harry Potter franchise theatrically, would they be required to shoot it in the United States or face a financial penalty? Or would this apply to the streaming show planned for Max? At this point, we just don't know. Putting franchises like that aside, though, the easy solution to this tariff situation for studios would be to bring domestic film production back to the United States. And that is the stated goal of the president. And a simple increase in domestic production would undeniably be beneficial to film industry workers here in the United States.
This guy's asking a lot of questions
but what
Trump
we
is
don't
not
have
asked.
right now is a solution.
Because Trump is a stupid person, and he does not think any of this stuff through. He's so simple-minded. He is obsessed with tariff as a word. He calls it a beautiful word. He's been saying that since the 80s. Tariff, such a beautiful word. Like, I'm surprised he didn't name one of his kids Tariff. That's how much he loves the word alone.
To the underlying problem,
It's
which is that it has
beautiful
become
word.
very expensive
Little tariff
to make
Trump.
movies in the U.S., especially compared to other places. Now, this has been seen as a failure on many levels.
Definition of
city, county,
reactionary.
and state, especially in California, for not being aggressive enough and not making sure that the tax incentives to shoot in California have been high enough to make the state competitive to other markets. There have been proposals to increase tax credits in California in recent months, but some state legislators have argued that the loss in revenue is too big a blow to the state's budget. In March, California announced a record number of films that were set to receive tax credits, though it was noted that most of these were smaller productions, with studios still choosing to shoot their big projects elsewhere. Many other states have reduced or let expire their tax credits in recent years because they found that most of the money was being paid to out-of-state professionals and that they didn't see a big enough return on those tax credits that they were giving to the film industry. Basically, the argument there is that the tax credits just weren't worth it, that the states were giving Hollywood productions millions of dollars in state funds with little or no upside or financial benefits to actual residents in that state. Now, there are some states like Georgia that have argued against that. Georgia offers a 20% tax credit to Hollywood productions with an additional 10% available if they put that little Made in Georgia stamp on the movie or the TV show. And Georgia claims to have subsidized up to $1 billion in tax credits to productions to bring work to that state. But even the Georgia
Tariff sounds like a frat boy from South Carolina wearing boat shoes.
The state subsidy. And while that was ultimately rejected, the point is that even in states with successful tax credits, the argument here is complicated and there is no easy solution.
I think you're hot.
And let's look at the solution that the president outlined in his statement, which is to return production domestically to the U.S. and to decrease foreign involvement.
I bet you he calls Tiffany Tariff. I'm sure whenever he refers to her, he just calls her Tariff, and she's just accepted it. Like, she doesn't correct him. She's like, thank you for acknowledging me, Father. I am Tariff.
And in order for that to happen, one of these things actually has to be a result of these proposed tariffs. Number one would be states offering better tax rebates. If states want film production to come back, they have to make it worth it. U.S. senators and representatives are going to have to work with state governors and local officials in order to find out a way to make these tax credits feasible. And in California's case specifically, they're going to have to decide between what's more important, the tax credits that bring production back or the impact that it has on the state economy. Another option would be a federal tax incentive. Right now, tax incentives for film production are only offered by state governments. If the United States is serious about returning production here, then they could consider offering through the federal government a subsidy like we've seen in other states. But in my opinion, this has a next to zero chance of happening. I just don't see the current U.S. government funding Hollywood movies to the tune of tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars, especially because so much of the headlines that we see right now are about the government cutting spending. And even if studios...
Yeah, and also because Trump, a TIF is a real estate tax credit, it wouldn't shock me if that influenced her name. Wait. That is exactly how Tiffany Trump got her name. What was I going to say? Okay, so Trump, he has, as I've talked about, he has this love-hate relationship with Hollywood. He loves the glamour, he loves the fame, he loves the stars, blah, 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 but he hates that a lot of them hate him. And so, no, the federal government is not going to, under Donald Trump, provide these incentives because that's not going to make all of these woke celebrities love Donald Trump. And also, it's not like when he talks about him being a producer, him being a filmmaker, him like not as the president actually doing something that is good for an industry in this country, but like what's good for him, Donald Trump. Like, how does he get to put his stamp on something, get to be in charge? I mean, seriously, the fact that I remind people of all the time is that Donald Trump in the 80s wanted to be a Broadway producer. Like, when he was in New York, I'm trying to remember the show that it was, Broadway show that Trump tried to produce. It was called, let's see. He was 23. Okay, so he was very young. He approached Broadway producer David Black and said he was interested in becoming a producer himself. According to an account in the New York Times, he offered to pay half of the $140,000 cost of Black's next Broadway production in return for teaching him the Broadway ropes and equal billing in playbill and on posters. Like, that's what he wants. He wants to be at the forefront of culture, even though he has no understanding of art. Trump had no experience but had reportedly done his homework on both Black and the show. Black agreed to put Trump's name over the title, though beneath his own. Here you can see David Black, in association with Donald J. Trump, presents Paris is Out. The show is a comedy titled Paris is Out by Richard Seff. It starred Sam Levine, Molly Picon, and it ran for just 16 previews and 96 regular performances, losing both Black's and Trump's investments. His brief bio appears in the playbill. Thus, Donald J. Trump, who joins Mr. Black in the production as associate producer, is making his theatrical debut. He is in the investment and real estate business and will be associated with Mr. Black in this new musical. Black later produced W.C., a musical based on the life of comedian W.C. Fields, without Trump's involvement. Despite the presence of Mickey Rooney and Bernadette Peters in the leads, it closed on Detroit during its out-of-town tryout in 1971. Meanwhile, Trump returned to the family real estate business, although at one point was reportedly considering the idea of a musical based on his life, to be called simply Trump. During the run of The Apprentice, Trump announced that he had partnered with Fran and Barry Weissler to produce a musical based on the series, which he was scheduled for a spring 2006 premiere. The project never came to fruition. This man is a fucking theater wannabe kid. And remember, there's a lot of evil people who have theater energy. Okay, not all theater kids are good. I would call Donald Trump a wannabe. At the time, Weissler commented, Donald Trump is a larger-than-life character, and the Broadway musical stage may be the only medium large enough for him. We know Broadway audiences will embrace the drama and genuine intrigue of The Apprentice, just as television audiences have. This past spring, the Times quoted Black as saying of his one-time partner, he did have a flair for show business. He liked putting his name on something that was not real estate. And if the play had been a hit, who knows, he might have continued. Can you imagine this alternate timeline where Donald Trump actually becomes a successful Broadway producer and never becomes president? The failed arts to fascist fuck pipeline.
Do receive federal funding through some sort of a tax rebate or a subsidy. I don't know if in this particular political environment, those federal funds would be free of strings regarding the content in those films or the staffing for those movies, the messages on those films. And I don't know if Hollywood executives, or at least most Hollywood executives, would be very happy about signing on to those federal funds with conditions attached. Number 3 would be to convince studios to just accept lower revenue. Studios could always just pay the higher price of U.S. production without tax credits or pay the tariffs. But they would have to agree to that reduction in revenue, which means that the impact of a hit would be blunted. The magnitude.
Yeah. You know who that's going to then turn around and affect the most? Not the studio executives, not the money people. They would then turn around and the actual workers, the people who labor on these productions, that will hurt them.
Of a flop would be even greater.
Studio execs can have $2 instead of 35.
Like the studios would do the noble thing and say, for the good of the industry, we're going to step up and we're going to take this hit if they can't work out a deal otherwise. But I think the more likely scenario would be that we would see Hollywood cut costs by greenlighting fewer films, which would lead
is
to
already
a
happening.
decrease in production, which would put us right back where we are. It's the same problem, just in a different way. Basically, this would mean that studios would probably lower the budget of their bigger movies, but for the mid-budget films or smaller budget films, they most likely just wouldn't happen. If a movie has a $30 million budget, but it can't get made for less than $50 million in the United States, or it's subject to a hefty tariff, rather than allocating that extra money, I think the studios would probably just cancel that film, and we would be left once again with fewer films being made, and also only the bigger event films being made, which is already an issue in Hollywood. In reality, the most workable solution is a combination of all three of these things. Increased state tax rebates with support from either a federal tax credit or some sort of federal funding, along with studios accepting that costs may still increase in exchange for supporting the domestic film industry. What this boils down to for me is that there is no easy fix to this problem. You cannot just wave a magic tariff wand and have the problem of decreased domestic film production solved overnight. In the best case scenario, what this could do is serve as an incentive for studios and state governments to figure out a workable solution for both of them. It would make going internationally to make your movies a lot more difficult, and it could bring both sides to the table to work out a realistic structure wherein everybody can thrive, domestic production would be increased, more workers here in the United States and in Los Angeles would be put back to work, and the industry overall wouldn't take too big of a hit. It is possible if you can get people to come to the table with the best intentions. And if these tariffs did that, then that would be a good result. It would be a result that is yielded from a imperfect process, but it is possible. But in order to achieve this, it's going to require time.
But a big element of this that is a big element is that we're not just talking about American films that shoot overseas. We're talking about American films that are imported by these film markets around the world, and how that is why film exports we have a surplus of, because of how big the American film market is. So if these other countries respond with retaliatory tariffs, if, like China, they are reducing the number of films that they are importing, that is affecting the film business. And what about my K-dramas?
A tariff system that Hollywood can actually understand so they can figure out what the solution should be. People on both the government and the studio side that can come together and understand that there is no perfect solution to this problem and that everybody's going to have to give something up. And mostly some adults in the room. The thing that we don't know right now, among many other things, is whether we will see any of these things actually materialize. And in the short term, what this means for Hollywood is even more chaos in a run that has seen plenty of it already being injected into the system. But what do you think about these proposed tariffs? Do you think it's going to be just more chaos in the Hollywood system, or do you think it might actually get a workable solution to the table? Let me know down in the comments below. And before we go, I want to thank the sponsor for this video, Factor. You know, I think spring might be my favorite season. It's not too cool, not too hot. Everything is nice and green. It's really the perfect time of year to spend, well,
yeah, just adding more chaos to the fire. That's Donald Trump's MO, more fuel to the fire. He is just an agent of chaos, but not even in like a brilliant villainous way. He's just a stupid motherfucker. He's so stupid. He's so reactionary. Everything he does. And then when he has to walk stuff back, he pretends that it's all part of the plan. He's like, no, that's what I meant to do that.